Well, good evening. It's 7 o'clock. As the vice mayor, I'll be chairing the meeting tonight because the mayor is unavailable. First, we have 4 presentations. We're going to have the Northwest Federal Credit Union presentation, the 2019 Herndon Festival, the National Night Out presentation, Parks and Recreation Month presentation, and the Athlete of the Year for the Special Olympics in Virginia. So next we have, or does anyone have any questions or comments on those? Okay. Next, resolution 19G42, to consider 2 additional chapters of the Urban Design and Architectural Guidelines for Herndon Transit Orientation Corps. And this project was originally heard on May 29th, and Bryce Perry will be giving us the staff report tonight.
Thank you. How is everybody?
Fantastic. How are you?
Not too bad.
Good.
Okay, so the design guidelines for signage and landscape design in the HDOC are back and ready for your further consideration. If you recall, the drafts were reviewed and endorsed by the Architecture Review Board and by the Planning Commission at previous meetings. Staff presented the drafts of these 2 chapters and a list of amendments for each of these chapters at Town Council, second set of Town Council meetings in May. The Council continued the guidelines at the request of one of the HDOC property owners to, obviously, the hearing for July. The intent of that continuance was really to allow that particular property owner some additional time to review the draft documents and get comments over to staff. Those comments were received last Wednesday and were actually fairly substantial in nature. Substantial to the level that some of the comments actually went beyond just what we had in the landscape and signage chapters, but into other already adopted chapters in the HDOC guidelines. Of course, staff's dispatch deadline was the following day, so we really didn't have a chance to evaluate those comments when they came in. In all honesty, the 11th hour submission has put staff in a little bit of a bind for this. We, of course, want to make sure we listen to all the comments that we receive, we listen to the stakeholders, and we want to make sure we give the time that we need to be able to properly evaluate the comments that do come in. If you all saw them, you saw that they were 10 pages of comments. They were thoughtful, they were detailed, and it would take time for staff to go through those. However, I do want to point out that the property owners did first receive the draft guidelines about 9 months ago, and a few times since then with repeated requests for comments by staff. This is a time-sensitive item. I know that came up last time, and maybe that point wasn't hammered home. It is a time-sensitive item. It was a struggle for staff to get the level of quality open space design expected and planned for in the HDOC with both the Metro Square development and the 555 Parkway development. And it was really the lack of design guidelines that is what made that difficult. Essentially, what it created was that any kind of special treatments or amenities in the open space were sort of all on the table for negotiation. And that added actually quite a bit of delay, I think, in the reviews of both of those projects. And really, what staff is trying to achieve with this is to make sure that, as envisioned by the master plan, that those types of discussions aren't really something that is a discussion. It's sort of in there as a standard already and taken off the table for negotiation, especially for any kind of development that's seeking a higher density, where we really do expect there to be quality open space design. So we do expect more HDOC development plans, including one from the one property owner that provided the comments in the very near future. And having these guidelines in place as soon as possible will give the town, staff, and boards and commissions, and of course, the means to assess what is appropriate in regards to landscape design. And I don't need to, you all know this, but I did want to reiterate that when it comes to design, the design of the open space and the landscaping really is of equal, if not more important, than the design of the buildings when it comes to defining the unique sense of place and the urban environment that was envisioned for the HTOP. So staff is recommending approval of the draft guidelines with the list of amendments. However, staff would also like to include in the town council's adoption a direction for staff to evaluate these comments further and then return back to the town council with recommendations for amendments to both the signage and the landscape and maybe some of the other chapters as well that I mentioned in these comments.
Okay.
Vice Mayor, I read the letter from the landscape architect in fairly great detail because I didn't understand some of the terms, so I started looking them up, and that ended up sending me down a lot of research. And my question I understand that the guidelines that we have were guidelines that were created by a consulting company, consulting
Correct.
firm. So some of the questions, some of the comments that the landscape architect fixed, and I assume it's Lerner's landscape architect?
Correct. Correct.
Okay. Sounded as, there was a lot of discussion of it being arbitrary, and in a lot of places in the guidelines that were written, it said this is an example of what we'd like to see, and in the letter, it took offense at the idea of having to buy a specific product. So my question is, if we pass this as a provisional, or as the guidelines that we want to see, final, with the possibility for amendments, how does that benefit the landowner or the developer who's getting ready? I mean, you said this is time sensitive. So how does it benefit them if we say, well, this is definitely going to be it, except if we have to do some amendments? Why not just take that month or so and do the research?
Because it at least gives us something now that we can use, whereas now we don't have anything. So if a submission came in next week, we wouldn't have any landscape guidelines to kind of hang our hat on or to prop us up, or we would be needing to rely on the broader and vaguer sort of concepts and principles that we have in our master plan document, which is what we have done in the past, but it was just a bit of a struggle because we didn't have any direct open space guidelines to use.
So we're going to say these are the guidelines, but we could change them at any time.
Well, I think the intent would be to start evaluating them right away and come back. I don't want to set a timeline on how long it would take, but come back in sometime soon and with recommendations for amendments. But we really just haven't had the time to take a look at this and to see whether or not what's in here is something that we would even recommend changing.
Yeah, I mean, the
Might not
curbless,
be.
the curbless streets was a big one, which, just cursorily, if you look around, different municipalities are doing curbless developments and consider them to be completely safe. So, if we give these guidelines to somebody who's going to be developing in the HTOC area, it's not going to be right away. They're not going to be able to get it off the ground in a couple months, so why rush, is my question. Because they still can't use them as guidelines.
Well, once they make the submission, it is really, at that point, they get sort of locked into whatever guidelines or regulations are in place at the time of submission.
Okay. That makes sense.
Anyone else have any questions? Comments?
I think, also for context, how long is the HTOC, like, as far as the reiterations and different proposals? How many times have we gone to the public? How many times since, 2007, 2008? I mean, how many times have we kind of gone through this?
specific to the guidelines or just the
Just-
overall
just
the
o-
HDOC?
Yes, overall in general, I think it's,
I don't know, Lisa, if you can help me answer that, but it's,
Well, the planning process for the metro area, that did start back around 2000. And I want to say, the guidelines, of course, were a public process, what we have today. And as Bryce said, that, you know, we sent them out for comment to all the property owners months ago, back in the fall. We had the planning commission public hearing.
the ARB had a special meeting just for this.
you had public unveiling in the council chambers too. I mean, there was reviews of that as well.
Yeah, well, back,
Right.
that was back during the original.
Well, and given that they asked us a month ago
Mhm.
to postpone it, and then they waited until Wednesday to send this to us.
All I'm saying, it's been almost 9 years. That's all.
If council wants an analogy, it's our town code, it's our zoning ordinance that is amended
Mhm.
anytime there's, you know, a good idea that staff, citizens identify.
Yep.
It's a living document, for lack of a better word.
And if we totally just keep going back to the drawing board, which we could do, the downtown, we've been working on that for 30 years plus.
Yep.
Okay. So, I mean, at one point, you've got to set some guidelines, and then that's what amendments are for. So, we could put this off until August, or we could go forward in July. So, unless we have objections, I think we're going to be going forward at the meeting next week. Any other questions or comments? Okay, next up, the ordinance to consider zoning text amendment, SOTA 19-1 to amend Chapter 78 zoning, planning development, urban residential district to create a new residential zoning district to implement the recommendations and standards of the adaptive area residential land use category. And we received comments, and David Stromberg, zoning administrator, will be giving us the staff report.
Good evening, Vice Mayor Olm, members of council. So yes, this is ZOTA 19-01, Plan Development Urban Residential. So this will be a new zoning district located in Article 5, which is where all of our plan development districts are located. And the reason why we're doing this is to implement the policies of the Herndon 2030 Comprehensive Plan, specifically properties identified as adaptive residential. And our area plans get more specific on how land should be used in certain areas in different parts of the town. And the South Eldon area plan is one of those that was just recently passed by the council this year in February. And within that plan was the Tier 2 category. So that's the transitional urban residential, and that's for parcels over 7 acres that do not abut Eldon Street. And that recommends, the use there that's recommended are townhouses and 2/2s or stacked townhouses. So those are 4-story buildings. They look like 4-story townhouses, but it's really a 2-level unit with another 2-level unit above it. The Metro Square development is the only product within the town where we have that. And so the plan anticipates 18 to 20 dwelling units per acre. So the goals are to preserve and protect existing neighborhoods, encourage multimodal uses, increase residential units to provide a walkable customer base, and have high-quality developments with interconnectivity. So within the area plan, there's only one property that is designated that. So that's the Finmark property. It's just under 9 acres and has multi-tenant office story, single-story offices there. So this is a text amendment. It is not a rezoning application. So this text will get it on the books, which will then give private property owners the opportunity to go ahead and request a rezoning of their property. So that means general development plan, proffered conditions, and then planning commission and town council. So the intent for this district specifically, again, to provide a buffer between existing residential developments and new nodes of commercial or existing corridor commercial development. Provide a mix of housing types, incorporate universal design where you can, energy efficiency and stormwater solutions on site, and then bicycle and pedestrian components, including those within the projects. So of the permitted land uses, you have single family, duplex and triplex, townhouses, stacked townhouses, multifamily, standalone daycare, and retail uses. Now this is the total menu of uses that would be permitted. Again, each rezoning application, the owner could proffer out some of those uses for their specific property. So there are dimensional requirements in this district, like many of our other districts. So the maximum density, it ranges between 15 and 20 units per acre. If you're only going to do one housing type, so if you have just all townhouses, your maximum density is 15 units per acre. If you're going to have a development that's townhouses and stacked townhouses, that gets your development up to a maximum of 20 units per acre. There is minimum lot area requirements, so a minimum of 20% open space, 8% of recreation areas, and then a maximum 60% building coverage. So the setbacks are designed to have the buildings fronting on public streets. So there's a 10 to 15 foot required setback range, and that's for public streets. Again, so if we're using Finnmark as an example, that's going to be there on Herndon Parkway, where you have 10 to 15 feet, where you have to be, can be extended to where you can be 40 feet back from the street if you incorporate a small little pocket park there at the front. And then all the internal private streets is just a minimum 5 foot setback with no maximum. There are also height limits. So looking at this picture, pretend you're staring down at a zoning map. So you have a piece of property, your development is that orangey brown colored PDUR, and next to you, you have single family residentially zoned property, and on the other side you have commercially zoned property. So your maximum height limit is 50 feet for most of the development, except when you get close to that single family. Then within 50 feet, the maximum height limit drops to only 40 feet. So that limits the types of buildings that can be there. Really, it's going to be either just a single family or a traditional townhouse. You can't really fit a stacked unit within 40 feet. You really need 50 feet for that. So that'll keep the stacked units away from any existing standard townhouses or single family developments. Again, there's a high importance on recreation and open spaces. In some older developments, open space was just calculated for any undevelopable piece of the property, even if it's in a back corner, counting towards the maximum. Here, it has to be some sort of usable or community amenity. So these are two examples of something that would function like that, meet that requirement. So that's a dog park and a community green. And there are standards for mechanical equipment that the HVAC units be located either on the roof or incorporated into the facades of the building, or it could be a combination of the two. And a big part of that is these developments, there's not much space to work with back there. It's already kind of hectic. You have driveways very close, waste and recycling receptacles. So the picture on the left is the Arrowbrook development, which was actually referenced by the letter you received. That would not be permitted under the draft proposal of the ordinance. The image on the right, that's a product over in Reston, that would be permitted because those HVAC units are incorporated into the facade there. And both of those are 2/2 stacked units.
Where are they in the facade?
Do you see this grate here?
Yeah.
So they're up, there's one here and then there's one up there.
Where's Waldo?
How does that, I mean, they complain about vibrating, is that not an issue?
We think as long as they're installed properly, there shouldn't be too many vibration issues.
Fort Riley has it.
Yes, those are all integrated into the building. Those aren't stacked, they're traditional, but yeah, they're all
I just blast the
incorporated.
TV,
Does it vibrate?
unless it's working correctly.
So there are also provisions for driveways. They have to be at least 18 feet. 18 feet is what you need to park a vehicle. So that image, all the way on the left, that shows the full driveway. Yeah, so you have your car out there. You can also, the developer can choose not to have a driveway, so that middle image would also be okay. You go from the alley directly into your garage. The image on the right wouldn't be permitted because it's under 18 feet. So you get these mini driveways where a lot of times people will want to park there for convenience because they need extra space. But you have, like, that vehicle is blocking the street and sticking out into the alleyway where people are traveling.
Dave, couldn't you just have a mini driveway with a regulation that you can't park on it?
You can, but that's pretty difficult to enforce.
Would it be within the HOA that would enforce that?
The HOA would probably be able to do that a little better. From a town perspective, even if we gave an NOV, you abate your violation and then you park there again. For the HOA, I think they would still probably rather not deal with it. So it's just easier to remove the temptation, is our thought on that. We have standards for mailboxes. They have to be located and accessible directly from a sidewalk. So this image on the left, that's something that would be permitted. The right would not be permitted because you have to stand there in the street in order to get your mail. So that's one of the requirements. And developments would have to follow the Town of Herndon streetscape standards. We do have a streetscape design manual for all streets in the town, but this specifies that the private streets will have to meet that standard as well. But the public streets, so that, again, if we're using Finmark on Herndon Parkway, that would have to go a little bit above and beyond and have at least 6-foot sidewalk and a 6-foot tree planting verge. And as I mentioned, multimodal accommodations, so transit facilities, bike and pedestrian facilities. This is a nice example of, again, the Metro Square development where they put one in, and that's a nice amenity that they added. You will have to add those as well for these types of projects. And so staff is recommending that the town council approve this text amendment. It went to the planning commission twice. They wanted to hear a few more details, and we actually worked out a lot of the details based on some of the letters from Cooley and from comments by the commission. That's actually where we added the retail option. The planning commission wanted to have that in there as well. So staff is recommending this version of the ordinance, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone have questions? Cesar?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for that presentation. On page 4, and this is in the context of what we've been hearing, at least I've been hearing from people in the community, an issue with availability of housing and going forward what the town might or might not be able to do. When I see things like high-quality developments, what do you want me to think about that? How should I sort of process that?
Well, I think any type of building, especially when you're looking at the lifespan of it, having high quality to begin with will allow that project to age gracefully.
So not necessarily granite floors and marble.
No, I mean, from the zoning perspective, we don't care what you do with the inside, to an extent.
I guess why call that out? Because my mind went directly to high-end units.
Yeah, I think there is a subtle distinction between high-end and high-quality. A lot of that is materials. Sometimes materials are used for aesthetic purposes, but higher quality materials actually have higher noise reduction in them than if you just had, let's say, vinyl siding. So it's not a purely aesthetic issue. High quality does make a better product, again, that is a better place to live.
And maybe this is a more of a legal question, but what can we do to ask or request or guide the more dense outcome? I think the more we build, the better off we'll be, being that there's a shortage of housing that's reachable within income levels throughout the county, quite frankly, Northern Virginia. So I look at all of these as opportunities to address that. Do we have any sort of guidance or exposure when we suggest a higher number of units in those areas?
I don't think so. I mean, part of the reason why this land use category has been targeted is because through the master plan, adaptive residential was always supposed to be slightly higher because it is between existing single-family neighborhoods and the commercial neighborhoods. During the South Eldon area plan, the density recommended was 18 to 20. So that's why this district was created. It's 15 to 20. Currently, the highest level of density you can get with any of our existing townhouse zoning districts is 15 units per acre.
Sorry, real quick. In terms of just real quick, because this is a pet peeve of mine. On page 12, I think it was.
Of the presentation?
Yes. You had a picture, yeah, that car, bad car on the right there, right? But what if someone wanted to park a motorcycle there and not sticking out, but kind of like parallel to it? It's a vehicle.
Right.
So by definition, you would say, I can't park my motorcycle there?
Yeah, a motorcycle makes a lot more sense because its maneuverability is completely different than
And if I have
an
a mini, like
automobile.
the vice mayor, I'm not park parallel.
I can park anywhere.
One of the things that it may not be noticed because it's pretty far down in there, but we tied this district, we just gave it the parking requirements of what I'll say is the rest of our suburban zoning districts, so it's a higher ratio that's required of parking versus some of the other townhouse developments that develop under the downtown zoning district, or again, Metro Square, that's under the PDTOC zoning district, and that has reduced minimum parking rates. We left this with the higher rate that's required of parking, so the overall development should have more parking in it, hopefully, because parking's a problem all over town. So we didn't want to do anything that would reduce the minimum amount of parking.
I hadn't noticed that. Thank you for that clarification. Page 13, just for my clarification, the mailbox on the right, you said something about that wasn't allowed or that wasn't permitted in this new district? Because that's what we have in Fort Riley. When I get my mail, I'm in the street.
Right, we wouldn't permit that in this new district.
But it's okay that I get rid of it, right?
It's expendable.
This is it.
Grandfather.
If you go, you go.
Okay, just curious.
Well, a lot of these provisions are just learning experience that we've had in the town where people who live in these developments, they say, hey, this is a problem for us. As somebody who actually lives here, we need this.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I heard that. So it's this new development standard. So, thank you.
Just, have we had any discussion, and just moving forward, I know one thing that New York City's been doing when they put, like, say, developments in a dense area, and they know there's people walking, They don't put sidewalks in yet. What they do is they see where people are walking, where they have the dirt. That's where they put the sidewalks in. So is that something that might be considered in the future, or?
I'm not sure if that's something, a route we would go. I mean, just from a administration standpoint,
Sure.
it's really difficult to do.
Yeah.
I'd rather have it be on a plan and you can enforce a plan.
Got it.
Just for practical purposes.
Understood. Just curious.
Bill, I'm gonna send you a link. There was a study at Cornell. When they did that,
Yeah.
they paved it, people started to pave another way. They paved that.
That's right. Yeah, can't wait.
Councilmember
Um,
Richards?
So, I just wanted to know why, when we have stacked, this is slide number 9, when we have a stacked and non-stacked residential, why do we want to keep them separate, so separate? You said we'll make sure that they're pretty far apart. Why is that?
They're not necessarily separate. Anything that's bordering some existing residential developments, we don't want to have a 4-level stacked townhouse bordering right up next to it. So this prevents that from occurring. It pushes them further into the zone.
So it doesn't impinge on the older residents'
Exactly.
standard of living? Okay, thank you.
So I'm glad you talked about, is anyone else? Yeah. No question? Okay. The letter we got from Cooley, and they talked about the units being above ground. When I read that, and then I went back and read, but my units, I live in a single-family home. One's in the attic, the other one's in my basement. So the people have to carry those in there. They don't have to put them with a crane on top of my house. So I like how you have those on the outside, because the ones where they were at Arrowbrook, where they're on the driveway, I can see that would be a nightmare waiting to happen with people running in, your neighbor running into your unit. There you go. So that was a good plan you had there. Any other questions, comments? Okay. So, next, number 7, the resolution to consider a special exception, 1904 on 1037 Sterling Road to allow a vocational school, the Divine Health Tech. And David's back on again.
All right, yes, this is a special exception request for a vocational school. It's in the crossroads of Dulles Office Park. So if you go to attachment 2 in your package, that has the location. It's really right behind Mellow Mushroom. And this property is zoned commercial office, and there really aren't many by right permitted uses other than pure office. So this use is permissible with the special exception request. And one of the things, this location may look familiar to some of you. Well, there have been a number of special exception requests within this development park, 2 of which, one was a beauty salon, which was approved. There was another salon which was approved by the Planning Commission, but the applicant withdrew before it came up to the council. And then there was one where an applicant wanted to do retail sales on this site, and that was denied by the Planning Commission and the town council at that time.
Spice shop, right?
Yeah. And so this is in the same location in that building, but staff evaluated that use, and the educational use is much more similar to an office type use than a retail use is. And there's a condition that limits the maximum class size to only 5 people. So it's never going to be a large group in there. There's a condition against it. The applicant has stated that some of the students usually take public transit, but even if not, it would be a most of 5 cars at any one time. And when this site was developed, it was actually overparked. They put in about 335 spaces, but only about 295 are required. So it's a little unevenly distributed on that site, but overall, there is enough parking to absorb that capacity of, again, just the 5. I mean, we want to be careful on special exception requests within this development, but in this case, we believe that it's okay. So with the conditions, the staff is recommending approval. And the planning commission did.
Any questions or comments? You know, we used to have an office in that complex, and over the years, I've seen driving schools there and tutoring after school, and it didn't seem to be much of a problem, so. Okay.
Can I?
Oh,
I'm
sure.
sorry, just really quickly. The restaurant parking, is that part of the 335 spaces?
It is,
Because
yeah.
I know when Mellow Mushroom first came in, there was a big crossover parking.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they deal specifically with, because there's a association, because those are all condominiumized businesses, how they work some of their internal stuff out with Mellow Mushroom, that I'm not sure, but they're part of the total.
And part of the problem was the shopping center next door was towing. It wasn't right, it was the other business.
So, well, that would be overflow parking from that condominium, so it makes sense.
Right.
Thanks.
Okay, so next, resolution, number 8 and 9, the resolution to authorize the FY 2019 funding. And do you want to do these together?
Yes, they're related. The
Okay.
resolution reserves the FY19 funds as of 6/30/19.
And this is
then
Jenny Tripoli, if someone's listening. Okay.
Thank you, sorry about that. And then the ordinance is for FY20 to amend the budget and make the reserve amounts
Right.
actual appropriations so that we can legally spend them. So it makes sense to do them together. So without further ado, we have a few, as you know, appropriations lapse at the end of the fiscal year. Oh, and by the way, happy new fiscal year, everybody.
Yes.
I wanted to bring hats and noisemakers, but probably wouldn't go well on the audio.
Do you want to unveil our fiscal year present?
Which is Karen. Karen Cagliano is our new budget manager.
Welcome.
Day 2 and welcome. Yes. Yes.
And then she gets a holiday.
Yeah, that was a good time.
So,
So you're.
so this year, because appropriations lapse at the end of each fiscal year, what we do typically every year is ask you to approve reserves for certain funds that are unencumbered and unspent, and then for certain encumbrances that do need to carry over into the next fiscal year because the projects are ongoing or timing didn't allow for completion in the current fiscal year, and that's usually paving. That's a big one. So you'll see the amounts on Schedule 1 of the first staff report for the resolution. We have a few O&M is operations and maintenance, so that's anything that's not personnel and not capital. We have just a few requests. Last year, for context, the requests were $330,000. This year, and this is just general fund, we're asking for $85,900. So we're bringing that number down, which is a good thing. The majority of these requests relate to ongoing projects or projects, again, that we just couldn't quite complete in the current fiscal year. We're asking $18,000 for the Herndon Festival to be carried over. The new location required some additional portable power sources, things like that, costs just a little more, so we want to reserve those funds. In finance, we do have that ongoing CIP project with the consultant. We're asking to carry forward. In community development and the town attorney's office, we need to do some office build out for new personnel for the new deputy town attorney and also for Corey Law's position. I think we have him in a little space right now, so we need to definitely expand that. And then finally, in the town attorney's office, $10,000 in professional services related to downtown Comstock. And that gets you to the $85,900. On the capital side, this is pretty much the Fund 015, the Capital Improvement Program Fund, and these are all the ongoing projects that we reserve every year. You'll notice that in the CIP book, there's a reserves column. These numbers may not necessarily match because those documents are all produced at a point in time, and of course the numbers change. So these are the various projects that are in the CIP. These are not, again, all general fund funded. Even though this total looks quite large, it is not a $23 million general fund ask, nor could it be. The majority of these projects, again, are grant funded transportation projects, so we're asking to reserve all of those. And then finally, Schedule 3 is the estimated outstanding encumbrances as of June 30th by fund. We're asking for those amounts to be reserved. The general fund has about 1.7 million in encumbered funds that are unspent. About 700,000 of that is deferred paving based on last year's weather. And then we have a new contractor this year, and about 250,000 is related to I believe it's a trash truck that was ordered, but it's not here yet, and those are not cheap. Water and sewer fund, about 1.6 million in encumbrances. That's mainly sewer relining, upgrades, etc. So that's mostly capital. Just a minor amount for the cemetery. Again, the capital projects fund, ongoing projects, 1.2 million in encumbrances, and the information systems fund. This is related to the EnerGov upgrade for permits upstairs. It's their software upgrade. And so with that, if you approve the resolution, then we can move on to the ordinance, which basically takes those exact same dollar amounts and makes them legal appropriations in FY20 for spending.
We have a capital project for an arc.
Seriously.
Pretty loud.
It is loud. I think Herndon has its own little rain cloud.
It's been rain.
Yeah.
That's the issue here.
It's not hail, is it? It was hail last week.
Maybe.
So does anyone have any questions? Everybody good with that? And we will be taking 2 votes.
By roll call.
By roll call, yes.
We usually say that. Thank you.
Thank you as always, Jen.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. So next, we have our town manager, and he's going to discuss the resolution to authorize a license so that we can get our facilities ready for
So we can start putting in the
the
cable
Wi-Fi in the downtown.
Yes, this
smart
is
city.
going to be a tag team event between myself and our esteemed town attorney. As you recall, last year we entered into a pilot project agreement with venture capitalist Vivacity to build smart cities infrastructure here in the downtown area. That included retrofitting existing light poles with LED lights, putting up 5 new smart poles with LED lights, and also enabling Wi-Fi in the downtown. It also has charging stations involved and a few other things. To make this happen, we have to run cable to backhaul the internet traffic to somewhere. And the nearest fiber location that they have is probably about a mile plus away. So we had to work with them on a route, on a site plan to cover that route. They have received site plan approval for the route. They've received right-of-way permits, are already ready to go, and for them to start digging, presumably the day after you presumably approve this. The reason why we are not doing a franchise is Vivacity is not a company that has the ability to obtain a franchise, so we have negotiated a license agreement with them to put fiber into our roads to bring it to the downtown to then start building out this project. As I mentioned a few moments ago, this would commence within a day or 2 after approval of the license. We are ready to roll. So, did I miss anything, Lisa, or do you want to chime in?
The license, because the site plan has already been approved, the license also permits the location of other facilities, including the updated streetlights. I know I'm missing some other things that are necessary to perform under their pilot agreement. As we've talked about a lot this year, I think, the state code requires that local governments authorize the use of the property. Not only is this our right-of-way, which we oftentimes grant franchises for, and sometimes licenses, This is our actual real estate in the town green, where they'll be locating some of the conduit.
And some of the runs penetrate into the building to get to the end location. The only thing that isn't covered in this license agreement are the vehicle charge stations. We were still in negotiations when we had to get this to you in July. So we kind of
Due
tabled
to
that.
their deadline.
To them, which was their deadline, that they have a customer that wants to do some self-service on some of these facilities, and they need to make their commitments. So in order for them to make it profitable for them to then do the rest for us, we felt it necessary to go ahead and push it forward now. We'll come back, we're still in negotiations over the charge stations, and they're still going to occur. It's just, it's not part of this event, it'll be a follow-up event.
Does anyone have any questions? And this will also be a roll call vote, so we get to have the roll call
Good
3
times.
times next week. Okay, thank you. So the next is a general item, and that is the lease in a town's building at 397 Herndon Parkway to Adelphi.
Correct.
Oh, Lisa, yes.
That's me. You'll recognize this lease. It's the same exact lease that we use to lease out town hall property. We have leased out an office in the town hall to our state legislators for many years now. I think everyone's proud to add another legislator, so that we now have 2 of our state legislators leasing from us for $1. We are currently unable to offer space in Town Hall, but the town manager located the space on Herndon Parkway in the building that's over by the police station.
And work with the delegate to make sure it was acceptable to him.
They
and
came in,
brought him
looked at it,
yes.
very pleased. In fact, he'd probably call me back in 30 minutes to sign the lease. We'll be moving in as soon as this is approved next week.
Any questions, comments? I know that when I found out that's where it was, I told the delegate, I said, I think you're really going to like this because they're getting ready to do the construction downtown. And you can have ADA accessibility where you don't in the other building. So he was like, oh, I didn't think of that. So that will make it easier for his constituents to get in and out. So, okay. So the next 1, 2, 3, 4 items are on the consent agenda. Does anyone have any question about any of those? We have reappointments to the Planning Commission and reappointment to the Architectural Review Board and the Heritage Preservation District. Authorizing the professional occupation tax refund and to appoint a deputy town attorney. Congratulations to our town attorney. Okay. No questions? Everything's good on that. So, who wants to start? Round table.
I'll go.
Thank you.
Sure. So I went last week to the middle school. Herndon High School had their briefing on the situation that they had with the former teacher there. Just want to say it was about 50 people showed up. I thought Dr. Noto and Fairfax County, along with Assistant Superintendent Tyson, did a very good job. There were some students there, but I just want to, I wanted to go just to, again, observe more than anything, but just to let them know that the town was behind them. And that was really good. Attended the NBRC meeting last Thursday, talked about philanthropy. It was interesting in regards to areas where amount of monies that are donated versus in different areas. That was pretty fascinating. And wishing everyone a happy July 4th. And it's Mr. Delago's birthday today, so I also got some cupcakes to celebrate.
All right.
Two kinds.
Yeah, absolutely. So, a little bit of America right there. So, if you want to have them, if you don't, that's perfectly fine. But
No, you
happy
guys-
birthday and
God bless all.
and happy birthday, America.
God bless all.
All right. Okay, who can beat that? Jen?
The only thing I would add is, I don't know if we acknowledged Teresa Fennessy was named Herndon Elementary Outstanding New Principal, speaking of our schools.
Yep.
So I thought that was great, especially given some of the history with Herndon Elementary. So that's come a long way, and didn't know if we were reaching out to her to acknowledge that, but just thought that was great news. So that's it.
I'm sure Vicki will be doing that tomorrow.
Very good.
Signe?
I attended the county's diversity inclusion conference on Saturday morning, which was amazing. It was co-sponsored by the ARC of Northern Virginia and the Board of Supervisors. And the keynote speaker was a gentleman with Down syndrome named Frank Stevens. And he could not have been more, not just inspiring, but he made me think of the dementia. Herndon is the dementia-friendly town, because what he was talking about was people not knowing how to approach people with disabilities, and so not including them, not out of unkindness, but not knowing how, what certain behaviors mean, that they're not threatening, that a person is lonesome, that a person may think slower than other people, and if you keep on going and bombarding them with stuff, they won't be able to finish what they're thinking. So lots of really beautiful information, and also ran into somebody sitting behind me who'd had the same kind of stroke my mother had had, and he has started up a bunch of different programs for people who are survivors of stroke. So that was personally interesting. But I have to say, one of our candidates for school board, Rachna Heiser, was there. She ran one of the sessions, met a lot of people who have done a lot of work to make sure that people with different abilities are included and are welcome and are as integrated in society as anyone else. And it was just beautiful, I have to say.
Great, thank you. Ready?
I don't have anything.
Okay. Cesar?
Real quick, definite shout out to the ladies World Cup soccer team. Hopefully next week we'll be proclaiming champions of the world there. So, and I share a birthday with Alex Morgan, our premier striker of the team. So, way to go, Alex. The round table, I just wanted to touch base on the feedback from that for the folks that may be listening. I thought it was amazing. I think it, for me, surpassed the first one, and I hope we continue to do this. The feedback has been really positive in terms of people feeling that we're listening. We're concerned, obviously, but I think it was a meaningful act for a lot of people that we took the time. And for the folks that have not had a chance to go, I strongly suggest we make an effort. We'll certainly publish the next one, but I did like the venue of this one too. It's different. It's a different crowd, so that's always good. As far as other stuff, the discussions, was that going to be made available? I don't know if anyone took
The discussions, no, we
like the
didn't.
Topics, any action items?
We just gotten some feedback from Signe, sending some notes to me,
Okay.
and that's the only thing I've received
Okay.
to date. We purposely kept, from the first, one of the lessons learned we had from the first roundtable was the notes were uneven and all over the map, and hard to
Okay.
follow.
They
You couldn't
were.
really tell. So we kind of pulled back from the note taking, since that is mainly between the constituents and you all,
Yep.
primarily, so we were kind of counting on you all to kind of.
I'll submit mine, I have some.
Absolutely. And just to go back, I plan to come back in August at the work session and talk about where are we going next.
Good.
I think it's great. I think
Okay,
it's great.
so be prepared for that discussion.
Looking
in August.
forward. Met with PBAC. I just want to communicate, we're working on the draft plan. Part of that, we had a discussion on these dockless vehicles or these electric vehicles. I guess everyone's aware that we have till the beginning of the year to actually pass something regarding that stuff. I didn't know it was that close in coming. So apparently, if we want to regulate these things, we've got 6 months here, so.
Is in the, if you want to learn more about it, it was in the legislative package, which I think was a couple of weeks ago, or maybe last month.
January 2020, for some reason, that deadline, I didn't know it was happening that soon. And apparently the trend is not so much on the e-bikes, but the e-scooters. And that's what we're seeing. And not just within towns, but from other jurisdictions, like people will.
Ending up here.
Yeah, they go from DC into Arlington, and just, there's no like central regulation on that stuff, so.
Interestingly, our neighboring jurisdiction, not neighboring, but City of Fairfax right now is doing an e-scooter pilot, and so we're watching that intently.
Okay, awesome.
Good luck, Rob.
Can I just add to that? My niece is a physical therapist in Austin, Texas. She says the most head injuries they see are just constant and severe head trauma. So,
From riding or tripping?
all of the
Yes.
above.
Okay.
Yes.
Everything to do with
Inertia.
scooters, yeah.
Wow.
She says, you know,
go fast.
we were talking about the town, and she said, outlawed, and she's young. So, you know,
Well,
you
I
think she would love
mean, it is a
but-
growing concern, so we'll certainly keep everyone posted on that.
Sounds like it.
And that's all I have.
I can also add to that. Actually, I had head injury while riding a motor scooter in West Virginia. So, and I was unconscious, and it took probably 6 months for the blood clot that was in my head to degenerate by itself. So, yeah, and it's a
So,
concern.
I'm glad you brought up the round table. I thought that the community round table, I thought that was great too. I didn't have as many people ask me questions that I needed to get back to them on, because I know the first one, if there was something I didn't have, I was getting their emails and getting back to them. So we were able to have conversations that seemed to make them happy. I think most of the people seem to just want to have conversations with us about what's going on, which was great. But it's kind of hard to come to a council meeting that's not really a discussion, so I think it is a successful event we're doing. Last week, I was at the Metro Monday representing the town, and Tom Rust was there, and we had Phyllis Randall and Sharon Bulova, and so it was really good talking about all the things that have been going on in this area.
That
so.
award was bigger than her.
Yeah, but I mean, it was
It's good meeting.
it was really good.
Yeah.
So, and I remember Tom Russ put me into all this because he put me on the Dulles Toll Road Task Force when he was the mayor. So, all things go back.
Yes, indeed.
And the 4th of July is coming up, so I hope everybody enjoys themselves. I know we're planning an island party in my neighborhood, and then we'll probably walk down and check out the fireworks without getting in our car and getting stuck in traffic. At least we never get back home, so look forward to that. And do you have any comments, Mr. Council?
Yes, I will be leaving town first thing in the morning, and will be gone until a week from today. I'll come in on the morning of the 9th, so I'll be back to work the 9th. Maggie will still remain in charge of that period, and Michelle will be in the office as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think that completes our agenda. Oh, pretty.
Sorry, I did not talk earlier, but how can I miss wishing everybody July 4th? Happy July 4th, everybody.
Happy birthday.
Absolutely.
And
happy birthday to
Happy
Cesar.
birthday
to
to
the United States and to Cesar and to my wife too. She's July 4th as well.
Awesome.
Very nice.
And Gracie's birthday is Sunday. So
There you go.
there we go. It must be a good time of year. So that completes our agenda.
Saturday.
Woohoo.
Sheila's not here to make a motion.
See, if there's no other business, then we're adjourned.
Second.
Okay.
Aye.
Cesar, all in favor?
I
We're adjourned.
Take care.